Hey guys, Miss Fearon here. Welcome to Unit 4 Notes 3. Our learning target today is can factor a trinomial. This is exactly what we did in Unit 4 Notes 2, except we're going to look at a different method. So if you don't like this method, this guess and check method that we're going to use, then go ahead and feel free to use the X method that we used back in Notes 2. So here's how factoring by guess and check works. So our first step is the same as it was in Unit 2. You always want to see if you can divide out a GCF first. Our next step then is to set up two sets of parentheses, just like our answers were in Unit 2. We just have to keep in mind that these first two are going to multiply to our ax squared. Our last two need to multiply to be our c value. And then we always have to check to multiply the insides and then add when we multiply the outsides to see if that gets me my bx that I want. So let's go ahead and look at example number 1 here. I have x squared plus 5x minus 6. First thing I'm going to do is set up my sets of parentheses here. And now I know that my first two need to multiply to be an x squared. So I know that I'm going to have an x and an x for that. Those are the only ways that I can get an x squared. I then want to see my last two need to multiply to be the c value. So I'm going to look at my factors of negative 6. I get negative 1 and 6, negative 6 and 1, 2 and negative 3, negative 2 and 3. So we can just try these out. I'm going to try the negative 1 and the positive 6 first and see if that works. So we just have to check and see if that's our answer by multiplying the insides. So I get a negative 1x and your outsides. So I get a 6x. And when you add them together, you want to get that bx value, which is exactly what I got. So I know that this is my final answer and I'm done. So we'll try that for example number 2 here. I have x squared plus 6x plus 5. So again, I'm going to set up my parentheses. My first two terms need to multiply to be the x squared, so I just need an x and an x. My last two terms need to multiply to be 5, so I'm going to write out my factors of 5. I just have 1 and 5. So I'm pretty positive that these are going to be my answers, but let's double check by multiplying the insides and the outsides and adding them together. So 1x plus 5x gives me 6x, which is what I want my bx. So I know that that is my final answer, and I am done. So let's look at example number 3 here. Again, I'm going to set up my parentheses. My first terms need to multiply to 3x squared this time. So to get a 3x, I know that I can just have a 3 times a 1. So I'm going to have a 3x times a 1x. My outside terms, or my last terms, need to multiply by a c value, which is negative 5. So if I looked at my factors of negative 5, I get 1 and negative 5, negative 1 and 5. So let's go ahead and try one of these. I'm going to try the 1 and the negative 5. So I'm going to add 1, subtract 5, and we need to check to make sure that we get the b term that we want. So we're going to multiply the insides, which give me 1x, and the outsides, which gives me negative 15x. When I add those, I get negative 14x, which is not my b value, so I know that's not going to be my answer. So let's go ahead and try this a little different here. Let's say we are going to flip these, and we're going to write negative 5 and a positive 1 on this way. So if we do that, again, let's go ahead and check the insides. Here we end up getting, multiplying the insides, we get a negative 5x and a positive 3x. So when you add those, I end up getting a negative 2x, which is exactly what I want. So we're good to go. That's going to be my final answer then. So sometimes you're just going to have to flip things around and play just to see how many different options do we have available and try them all, but make sure you're checking that that inside term matches our bx that we want. So I want you to go ahead and try number 4 on your own. There's multiple different options that we have available here because our first could multiply to a 2 times 2 or a 4 times 1. So we have to figure out which one is going to be which that we're going to put in. So go ahead, pause the video, try this one on your own, come back and check your answers. So I ended up getting 4x minus 1 times x minus 4. Again, there are so many different options you could have gone through, and that's why most people like using the x method. It's just something to lay out your thinking as you're working. But whichever method you like the most, if you're going to use the guess and check, just make sure that you're checking that your middle term actually matches what you want your middle term to be. Your next step is to work on practice for Unit 4, Notes 4, or Practice 4. Practice 3. Ask me if you have any questions.